Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Let's just dive right in, because we're about to explore a physical space that is so legendary it practically has its own heartbeat. We're talking about the ultimate launchpad of legends. It's this singular, iconic room in West Hollywood that literally changed the trajectory of modern pop, rock, and even comedy forever.
And really, that brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. How exactly did one tiny 300-seat room launch the biggest legends in modern music? I mean, when we think of superstars today, people like Elton John or the Eagles, we usually picture massive, sold-out stadiums, right? You picture tens of thousands of screaming fans. But before those stadiums, before the multi-platinum records, there was just this incredibly unassuming, dimly lit little club right on Santa Monica Boulevard.
The incredible Linda Ronstadt actually hit the nail on the head when describing the vibe of the space. She said, "The Troubadour was where everybody went to hang out and to be noticed. You wanted to make yourself known to the record community at large, you go to the Troubadour." So it wasn't just a place to go and play a gig, it was a bona fide career launchpad. If you wanted to make it big, you had to conquer this specific stage.
All right, Section 1, the ultimate star-making stage.
So this club was opened back in 1957 by a highly eccentric, super flamboyant visionary named Doug Weston. And the Troubadour didn't just become a hot spot by accident. Weston intentionally created this environment that allowed raw, totally unknown talent to test out their material. And that establishes our main thesis for today. Legendary careers don't just appear out of thin air. They really don't. They require the absolute perfect ecosystem to incubate, to grow, and eventually to explode. And for the Troubadour, it all came down to this number. 300. That was the maximum capacity. Just take a second and imagine that. Imagine sitting in a room no bigger than your local movie theater, literally elbow to elbow with total strangers, watching some unknown artist walk onto the stage, only to realize midway through the set you're witnessing the birth of a global icon. That sheer intimacy, that was the secret sauce. You couldn't hide on that stage.
Moving right along to Section 2, the California Sound Triangle.
In the early 1970s, the Troubadour wasn't just operating in a vacuum. It was actually the centerpiece of a highly specific three-part ecosystem that built the dominant pop sound of the decade from the ground up. Step 1 was Laurel Canyon. It offered cheap rent and isolation, but it was just minutes away from the Sunset Strip, so artists were living on top of each other, trading chord progressions on their front porches, attending these wild open-door parties at Cass Elliott's house. It was the ultimate creative incubator. Step 2 was the Troubadour itself. This was the social hub. This was where that informal, loose canyon community actually met the music industry and a real paying audience. But you needed Step 3 to complete the triangle, Asylum Records. They were the commercialization engine that took the absolute magic happening on that stage and pressed it onto vinyl.
So, Asylum Records was founded in 1971 by David Geffen. And here is the amazing part about this. He literally created the label out of pure necessity, simply because he couldn't get Jackson Browne a record deal anywhere else in town. He intended it to be an actual asylum, like a safe place for artists who didn't fit the traditional mold. Geffen prioritized the artist's own creative instincts over standard industry formulas, and he offered them unprecedented creative control. Because of that, Asylum basically became the in-house commercial engine for the entire talent pool hanging out at the Troubadour.
All right, Section 3, Elton John's American debut. We are traveling back in time to the night of August 25, 1970, for a quick deep dive into what is arguably one of the most explosive career launches in rock history. Picture this scene. The 300-seat room is absolutely packed to the gills with music industry heavyweights. Quincy Jones is there, Gordon Lightfoot is there, Mike Love from the Beach Boys, Leon Russell. They're all waiting to see this totally undiscovered British pianist who had sent his debut record to Doug Weston. Weston booked him immediately upon hearing it. And to introduce this unknown kid, Neil Diamond steps up to the mic to thunderous applause and says, "Folks, I've never done this before, so please be kind to me. I'm like the rest of you. I'm here because of having listened to Elton John's album, so I'm going to take my seat with you now and enjoy the show."
Now, after Neil Diamond takes his seat, this totally unknown artist, Elton John, walks out onto the stage in dead silence. No banter, no grand greeting to the crowd. He just walks right over to the same house piano his idol Laura had played just 2 weeks prior. He sits down and launches solo into Your Song. Midway through, Dee Murray comes in on bass. The tension in that tiny room is palpable. Then they pivot right into Bad Side of the Moon, with Nigel Olsson kicking off this massive thumping drum intro. By the end of that second song, the crowd was officially sold. There was no going back. In just 2 songs, a superstar was born. And the impact of that set wasn't just felt in the room, it rippled out instantly. Robert Hilburn, who was the music critic for the Los Angeles Times, wrote the very next day, "Tuesday night at the Troubadour was just the beginning. He's going to be one of rock's biggest and most important stars." And honestly, he hit the nail on the head. Rolling Stone later declared these shows to be among the 20 most important concerts in the entire history of rock and roll. The local press recognized instantly that a global legend had taken flight.
Which brings us to Section 4, Serendipity at the Front Bar.
You know, the magic of the Troubadour wasn't just what happened up on the stage. It had this profound multiplier effect off the stage, too. It functioned as a critical social hub where artists watched, judged, and collaborated with one another. Let's look at these two separate trajectories. You have Glenn Frey. He was totally broke, living in a cheap duplex in LA. His downstairs neighbor just happened to be Jackson Browne, who practically begged David Geffen to sign Frey because the poor guy couldn't even pay his rent. Then, on the other hand, you have Don Henley, another young, hungry musician Geffen brought into his orbit to try and form a band. Well, where did these two artists actually meet in person? Right at the front bar of the Troubadour. Geffen put them in a room together, and they went on to birth the Eagles. Now get this, the Eagles never actually played the Troubadour as a band, but the band literally wouldn't exist without that room.
And the discoveries just kept coming, largely thanks to the club's famous Monday Hootenanny open mic culture. Cheech and Chong, discovered right there by Lou Adler. Tom Waits, he used to beg to play, finally got a slot when someone fell sick and got signed by rock manager Herb Cohen on the spot. You had Steve Martin entertaining restless crowds by doing his comedy routines on a banjo while a headlining band was running late. Even the legendary counterculture writer Charles Bukowski met his future wife at a poetry reading there. The sheer volume of cultural history generated by this one-room's open-door policy is just staggering.
Section 5. Decades of breaking new talent.
Now, it's important to note that the magic wasn't just confined to the folk and country rock of the 1960s and 70s. As the music industry evolved, the Troubadour continuously adapted, remaining a vital launchpad across entirely distinct musical eras. In the 70s, sure, it's the singer-songwriter era, bringing us icons like James Taylor and Carole King. But flash forward to the 1980s, the club radically shifts gears to glam metal. In 1985, Guns N' Roses debut their classic Appetite for Destruction lineup right there. Less than a year later, in February 1986, they play a show there with David Geffen in the audience, and he signs them to his label. Then we roll into the 90s, the era of alt-rock, where bands like Radiohead make their US live debut on that exact same stage. We're talking different decades, completely different sounds, but the exact same launchpad.
And that really brings our story full circle today. In 2007, James Taylor and Carole King returned to the Troubadour for a highly publicized 50th anniversary run. They actually brought back their original backing band. They played to that same intimate 300-seat room where they had first co-headlined way back in 1971. Honestly, it just proves the deep, enduring magic of the space and the profound, lifelong gratitude these absolute superstars still hold for the physical room that gave them their big break.
So, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question to chew on. Where are the troubadours of today's digital landscape? We really don't have Laurel Canyon and a central physical club in quite the same way anymore, do we? Algorithms have sort of replaced the A&R scouts sitting in the back booth. But the core lesson of how legends launch their careers remains exactly the same. Legends are born in communities. They are forged by testing their art in front of a live audience and by serendipitous collaborations at the proverbial front bar. So as you navigate your own creative journey, ask yourself, where is your creative community? Because who knows, you just might be standing in your own launchpad right now. Thanks so much for learning with me on this explainer. Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.